Pretty fantastic space, huh? Don't get attached. I'm sure we'll be experiencing some things at the other end of the spectrum. But this is Ayodhya, or palatial. Even air conditioning, huh? Are you going to be with us the whole time to play mridanga, like you just did? You're going to be here the whole time? That's your assignment, okay? I'm sure Govinda will be very happy. He'll be very happy too.
He's hired.
Devotees have come here from faraway places. Different corners of the world, literally, to honor the place of Lord Ramachandra, Ayodhya, and the Balakanda and Ayodhya Kanda of Ramayana will be our main topics. We'll also visit Naimisharanya because it's very proximate to where we are. Just a little bit about the plan for the flow of our activities in each place. A behind-the-scenes juggling act of how to accommodate and make the good experience for all of you has been an interesting exercise. But there's a number of devotees who have prepared sloka recitation and bhajan performance. And I'll be making, when we have the opportunity, that's what they'll do. It'll come before kirtan. And I encourage you, you've come a long distance to take part in this gathering, and it's an important part of the experience of hearing our great Vaishnava acharyas or Bhagavatam speaking about the glories of Lord Ramachandra, etc. So, time permitting, some cases there won't be, because we'll go from one place to another place, but time permitting otherwise, please participate. The first of those bhajans that were sung, it's a song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so I'm going to reference its message for starters. From the Goptritve section of Sharanagati by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as most of you know, perhaps all of you know. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya in our line of disciplic succession, wrote a number of songs describing and feeling actually the mood of Sharanagati, the mood of coming to the position of surrender and shelter, Sharana, taking shelter of the personality of Godhead in full devotion. And one of those sections is Goptritve. Goptritve is a term that means the Lord is my maintainer. I feel safe in his shelter, and I have to engage in practical activity, but it is he who is maintaining me. So that song was selected as a mood-setting introduction to our Ayodhya Yatra. He's our place of shelter. In that song, Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings or writes that it's by mercy that one gets the position of shelter. It's by the mercy of the Lord, which means by the mercy of the devotees of the Lord, we get the mercy of the Lord. One gets his shelter. And by getting his shelter, we get his protection. We get everything, whatever it is that one needs, just as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Kshema Vahamyaham. Whatever it is that one needs, Krishna supplies. Whatever one has, Krishna maintains. He does it personally. It's a personal relationship. So we've come, this is the mood of this yatra. We've come to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, we can take shelter of the Personality of Godhead anywhere, in any circumstance. But in the places where he performs his pastimes, eternal pastimes, there's special potency and there's special attraction for hearing about him in those places of pastime. So here we are in an air-conditioned palace. It's not his place of pastime, but very proximate, and this is to prepare us to enter into Ayodhya and Chitrakoot and Naimisharanya and these other places that we'll be visiting. Starting with sound, so it's preparing the heart. Very similar to the way that Sita made her appearance, as you know, King Janak, as kings would do, would arrange for sacrifices by the brahmanas, and one of the ceremonial functions of the king or the person sponsoring the yajna is they would literally prepare the field, the kshetra, the place where the yajna would be performed. And that was done by leveling the ground, and leveling the ground was done with a plow, and so the king would go and plow the ground, and as he was plowing the ground, preparing the ground for the yajna, out from the ground came a golden child. Lots of other things come when you plow the field, but not a golden child. So he took it as a providential arrangement, which it was, and accepted the child as his daughter, along with his queen, who was very happy to accept Sita as their daughter. And in fact, that's the meaning of her name. Sita in English means furrow, or where the line of the plow makes its mark in the ground. Sita. So that's what we're trying to do this evening and the next day or so, preparing the ground, that entering into the mood of coming closer, sharanagati, coming closer to the position of surrender and shelter of Lord Ramachandra. So we're going to hear a lot about Lord Ramachandra, and of course, with the Lord comes his associates, and comes his dham, and comes his wonderful exchanges of love. He's at the center, and all the other things come with him. And so we'll be hearing about him in all those things. Following tradition, I learned this from studying the writings of Jiva Goswami, that when you speak on a subject, one of the first responsibilities of the speaker on a subject is to indicate what references you're going to be drawing from. Those of you that have done master's degrees and higher studies degrees, you know about this. You're going to write a paper, one of the first things you have to do is you state what are the references and how you're going to use them before you write your paper, your thesis or your dissertation or whatever it is. So that's what we'll do this evening. The primary reference is Valmiki Ramayana. And tomorrow we'll hear more about the life of Valmiki. But now we're just going to hear a little bit about Ramayana. And Ramayana was composed by Valmiki by a plan of the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord always works through his devotees because he likes to honor his devotees. So Lord Brahma inspired Valmiki to speak a certain verse and then compose that verse into a 24,000 verse text called Ramayana. Ramayana. So it's Valmiki Ramayana. But so in this Valmiki Ramayana, there's benedictions that Lord Brahma gives to the author and to the speaker, because both are required. During this time, there was no writing. Not that people didn't know how to write, but people had memories such that they could hear something and remember it. So it was a song. The Bhagavatam was written before it was written. It was oral. The Bhagavatam, you know how, along with the purports, it sits on your shelf pretty big. How many verses in the Bhagavatam? 18,000. Ramayana is bigger than 18,000. 24,000. And at the beginning, there's some, appropriately, benedictions given by Lord Brahma, which Valmiki then puts within Ramayana and says, this is what Brahma said about Ramayana. As long as the mountains stand and as long as the rivers flow, that's as long as creation exists. This narration of the pastimes of Ram will decorate the hearts of all who hear it and speak it, and will uplift the whole world. That will endure. It has that duration. This is a previous yuga that it took place, and here we are several yugas later speaking the topic of Valmiki Ramayana. He goes on to say that even after the snow-capped mountains are gone and the rivers are no longer existing, this glorification of Ramayana will continue to exist. Because Lord Ramachandra is eternal. He appears in this world like Krishna appears in this world. From the spiritual realm, he performs pastimes, stays for some time, and then he returns to his abode. The glorification is something that we hear during our cosmic manifestation, but the glorification is eternally going on because he's eternal. Valmiki writes, when Lava and Kusha were the speakers, after Valmiki was inspired and instructed to compose Ramayana, he wanted the world to have the opportunity not just to hear it, but to experience it, because it's an experience. It's not just information. When it's properly composed and properly passed on. Lava and Kusha, being the sons of Lord Ramachandra and Sita, eminently qualified. Bear in mind, these are pastimes. It means these are actually eternal associates of the Supreme Lord, getting some opportunity to display some pastimes to attract us and give us something so many years later to speak about, to remember and become attracted to Lord Ramachandra. So their manner, when he was considering who would be qualified to present this, we'll hear more tomorrow, he was very particular. It had to be persons not only that could say it without changing it, but they had to feel it. They had to understand the mood of each of the persons, and by their feeling and experiencing the moods of those persons, convey the moods of those persons. And he was wondering, who is that qualified person? Some days passed when he was pondering, and Lava and Kush came, offered their respects before Valmiki and asked, is there some service for us? And just hearing the tone of their voice and the composure of their royal personalities, their clarity of mind, it was very clear. So in his ashram, he expertly, as he had expertly composed the Ramayana, he expertly trained them how to sing. Doesn't say exactly how, but how to sing, apparently sometimes together and sometimes this one. However, it was orchestrated, where the mood was such that the audience felt that they were participating in the pastime. The whole of Vedic, I learned this from Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the whole of Vedic drama that goes along, culture, art, music, drama, it's meant to, there's a science of how to churn emotion that's directed toward the personality of Godhead. Because we have emotion, but it's not directed toward the personality of Godhead. And therefore our lives are confused. And we suffer unnecessarily. So, this composition of Valmiki was designed to attract people's hearts, their mind, their whole being, to the glories of Ramachandra. And Lava and Kusha were so qualified, and Valmiki trained them so expertly, that was the experience of the audience. It's described in Valmiki Ramayana. They felt their whole being was lifted to a stage of bliss. Their sensations, their mind, their thoughts, their contemplations, their whole being was experiencing being there with Ramachandra's pastimes as they were taking place, although many of them were long, long ago. And then Lord Brahma gives the benediction for one who narrates. Lava and Kusha, being so qualified to narrate, they will live in the presence of the Supreme Lord, just through that the power of sound vibration when properly conveyed. In the Balakanda section of Valmiki Ramayana, Balakanda is the first section. It means the childhood pastime. Valmiki explicitly says that he was intending another name for Ramayana was Sita Charita, or the wonderful pastimes of Sita. And another name for the same literature, Polastya Vadha, the killing of Ravana. Polastya, because he was the son of Polastya. So Polastya Vadha. It has many intentions, in other words. You can give it this name, that name, the other name. Many intentions. Because with Ramachandra comes his whole entourage. And a specific purpose of his appearing was to eliminate Ravana and Kumbhakarna. The whole of everything was planned, designed, staged, everything by the personality of Godhead. Quite a drama. Quite a dramatist. By his internal potency, all these things have taken place. So bear that in mind as we're hearing all this. So amongst the commentators, this is another for example. So Ramayana, Sita Charita, Polastya Vadha. The commentators of Balakanda ask the question and then they answer it. Of course, the Ramayana is about Ram, so naturally one may think Balakanda is the childhood pastimes of Lord Ram. But you know how commentators are. They like to churn the nectar. And so they take the topic of Balakanda and say, actually, it's about Vishwamitra Muni. And we'll hear a whole long session about Vishwamitra Muni. But in short, he went from a king to a perfected soul. And lots of stops along the way in between. And what finally transformed him, all of those preliminary things, were to permit him to do the one thing. Same with our lives. To get the association of Lord Ramachandra. We'll hear. So it's about becoming a devotee from a non-devotee. There's so many fantastic scenarios or focuses of wonderful lessons if we hear in the proper manner, hear with faith, hear with attention, hear with eagerness to come closer in our hearts, not just our minds, our hearts, closer to Lord Ramachandra. Valmiki Ramayana has that potency. Prabhupada writes in his purport from the 9th canto, because that's where in the Bhagavatam the chapters are for the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. Actually, Shukadeva Goswami says, "O King Parikshit, anyone who orally receives the narrations concerning the pastimes and characteristics of Lord Ramachandra will certainly ultimately be freed from the disease of envy and thus liberated from the bondage of fruitive activities. Dvesha towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead brings us here and keeps us here. Just hearing what we're doing, hearing the narration of the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, and which means, of course, his associates and everything, it has the potency, heard properly, to break the bond of envy towards the personality of Godhead. That is to say, restore love at the heart level for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus the chain that keeps us here, the bondage to fruitive activities, is broken. But these are some of the mahima, or glories, of the subject. Specifically, Valmiki Ramayana. Now there's commentators, this is now disclosure time. There are some of the sources of what we're going to be discussing. Primarily it's Valmiki Ramayana, but there's commentators that help us understand Valmiki Ramayana. And there are three principal ones. There's many, but three principal ones, commentators on Valmiki Ramayana. And the three names, the first one is Govindaraja. Govindaraja was a Sri Vaishnava who lived in Tirupati. He was a disciple of Satta Kopa, and his place of residence was, at night he would take rest just outside the altar area of Venkateshwar. He was a very privileged holy man, Govindaraja. One night, in his dream, Venkateshwar appeared in his dream and instructed him to write a commentary on Ramayana. He was very happy to receive instruction of service from Lord Venkateshwar directly, and so he did. And it's understood by those that have read, I haven't read, Govindaraja's commentary is something like it's spoken about Krishnadas Kaviraja's description of the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Most scholarly, most comprehensive, most deep, most profound, most elevated, and loved by anyone who loves Valmiki Ramayana and as a result loves Ram, to go more deeply into the meaning of the words of Ram and the pastimes of Ram and the exchanges of Ram. Govindaraja is such a source. As for us, Krishnadas Kaviraja is for the life of Mahaprabhu. A second, amongst all three are Sri Vaishnavas, Vedanta Deshika, very prominent personality in the Sri Vaishnav line. He focused his commentary primarily on the event of Vibhishan taking shelter of Ram, the Sharanagati topic. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote so many songs just on that one topic, Vedanta Deshika takes that episode of taking shelter of Lord Ram by Vibhishana to great lengths. When we were conducting our South India Yatra, we visited Tirupalani. We also heard that it was called Sharanagati Kshetra, the place of surrender. The others also took shelter there. But that's a primary focus of Vedanta Deshika's commentary on Valmiki Ramayana. And the third, I've heard of both of those, so I'm less familiar with this third one. Priya Vachan Pillai didn't take a verse-by-verse approach. Rather, there are certain very famous slokas out of the 24,000 slokas, and he would take those slokas and write essays, deep, profound essays on special meanings embedded within the whole of Ramayana. And it is said that those in the Sri Vaishnava tradition in particular, who like to speak about Ram and Ramayana and Ram's pastimes, make ample efforts to his work. And there are others. But you'll hear, just even in a moment, Govindaraja is a prominent source. In Govindaraja's writings is called Ramayana Bhushana. Bhushana means ornaments. So he uses that metaphor of ornaments to describe the pastimes and exchanges of Ram and his teachings and so forth. Early in the Balakanda section of his writing, he makes the statement that Lord Brahma originally spoke Ramayana in 1 billion, not 1,000, not 10,000, not 100,000, not 1 million, not 10 million, 100 million. 1 billion verses. Govindaraja says that, and Prabhupada doesn't cite Govindaraja, but he says it in his purports of the Bhagavatam. In the 12th canto, the final chapter of the 12th canto is describing the Bhagavatam. And there's a verse spoken by Suta Goswami where the speaker, Shukadeva Goswami, is being referred to. And the composition of the Bhagavad, the composition of all the Vedas and all its different divisions. So Prabhupada writes, there is also the account of the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra spoken by Valmiki, the account originally related by Lord Brahma in 1 billion verses. So without specifically saying Govindaraja said it, Prabhupada's saying it. There is also an account. So Lord Brahma recited and instructed those 1 billion verses to his disciple, Narada. Narada, in turn, in detail, doesn't say how many, but in detail instructed Valmiki. And in the Valmiki Ramayana, in the very beginning verses, it's about 90, where he, as happens again and again and again and again in the Ramayana, the retelling of the whole Ramayana. Narada speaking a summary, some 90-something verses of the whole of Ramayana, the very, very, very beginning. And based upon that, Brahma to Narada, Narada to Valmiki, Valmiki getting the benediction from his Parama Guru, Lord Brahma came to him and told him, there's different versions you'll hear in a moment, it was I who inspired you to speak that verse, condemning the hunter who killed the Krancha bird. Another version is, it was Saraswati, I instructed Saraswati to decorate your speaking in such a way that you meditate on this verse, and I've described to you the pastimes of Lord Ram, and you enter into meditation, and I give you this benediction. I really like this. Not only you'll be able to experience the pastimes, you'll be able to feel the feelings and emotions and deep concerns of each of the personalities. It's like super soul. I give you that benediction. Please compose. Now, why Valmiki? Because Brahma could have done it, or Narada could have done it, or because he was such a devotee. So, and the Lord likes to glorify his devotee. And then he did. And then the devotee wants to glorify the Lord. And so he did. And here we are. Now I remember very well, I'll share something, first reading the Ramayana section or the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra from the Bhagavatam, Canto 9. And in the very beginning, Shukadeva Goswami says, I will only narrate those versions that are authorized. Which means, 5,000 years ago, there were many versions. And there were many that weren't authorized. But there were many versions, and that was 5,000 years ago. Now, among those many versions is the Adhyatma Ramayana. Now, I hadn't heard too much about Adhyatma Ramayana, except I knew there are two references. Sanatana Goswami speaks of it, or he refers to it as part of Bhavishya Purana. It's made of 4,000 verses, so that's like almost a quarter of the whole Bhagavatam, from Bhavishya Purana just about Ramachandra. And Srila Prabhupada also refers to Adhyatma Purana, Adhyatma Ramayana. He refers to it in the 9th canto. He refers to it in Chaitanya Charitamrita when speaking about from chapter 9 of Madhya Lila. He says specifically, Adhyatma Ramayana, chapters 12 through 15, there is this following description of deities of Lord Ramachandra that were worshipped at the time of Lord Ramachandra. Now, the time of Lord Ramachandra is not the time for deity worship. It's yajna, but there was deity worship, we'll hear in a moment, even in Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga, as well as Dwapara Yuga, as well as Kali Yuga. So the Adhyatma Purana says, when Ramachandra was ruling in Ayodhya, this is from Prabhupada's purport, sometimes he would be gone from Ayodhya for attending to something. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week. There was one Brahmana in Ayodhya that he wouldn't eat, he would fast unless he saw Ram that day. And if he didn't see Ram that day, he would fast. So when Ram was gone, he fasted. So when he's gone for a week, he fasted for a week. And then when Ram would come back, some days later, according to what Prabhupada writes in the purports, 8 or 9 days later, Ram would come back, he'd break his fast. Ramachandra came to know about this Brahmana's vrata, and he was very moved by his love. And so he instructed Lakshmana to give this Brahmana deities of Sita and me. So he wouldn't have to fast, because he could see him in his deity form. And for the rest of his life, that Brahmana worshipped with love the deities of Sita and Ram. Before he died, he gave the deity, this is Adhyatma Purana, he gave the deities to Hanuman. And Hanuman carried them around, wearing them on his neck, the deities of Sita and Ram. And for his life, he worshipped the deity of Sita and Ram, according to Adhyatma Purana. When it was time for Hanuman to depart to Gandha Madana mountain, he gave the deities, Hanuman gave the deities to Bhima, who took them into the palace, and he worshipped the deities of Sita and Ram. And he passed them on to the next line of the descendants of the Pandavas, and according to Adhyatma Purana, that continued up to the last of the Pandavas, whose name was Kshema Kanta. Then Prabhupada adds, later those deities were placed in the care of the kings of Orissa and worshipped there for some time. And then it gets a little fuzzy because there's two in the same purport. It says Madhvacharya, 3 weeks before his departure, received the deities and installed them in Udupi. In another paragraph of the same purport, it says Narahari Tirtha, in the line of Madhvacharya, received the deities and they were installed in Udupi. And then Prabhupada writes, those very same deities that were given by Lakshmana to the Brahmana were worshipped since the time of Ikshvaku. Before Ramachandra appeared, the same deity of Sita and Ram. This is Adhyatma Purana, Adhyatma Ramayana. Pretty amazing. Now, there's differences found in Adhyatma Ramayana and Valmiki Ramayana. The storyline is basically the same. And we'll hear more about this tomorrow morning, but I'm going to say it a few times because it's important today, and a few times tomorrow because it's important to understand when there's discrepancy in these different authorized and authentic and accepted by our great acharyas narrations of, in this case, the pastimes of Ram. How do we process that? According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Tad idam kalpa bede naiva sambhavyam. I'll say it 2 more times. This is to help me as much as it is to help you. Tad idam kalpa bede naiva sambhavyam. One more time. Kalpa, sometimes Prabhupada translates it as a millennium, or whatever that means. And sometimes it's more specific, it's a day of Brahma. Kalpa. Veda means different. So different kalpas, different days of Brahma. Sometimes it can mean different manus, during different cycles of the 4 yugas. There are different appearances of Ram. And so sometimes this detail, sometimes that detail. Tadidam kalpa bede naiva sambhavyam. So now I'm just going to go through a few, and I'm thinking at the very end, the final day, I'll review a little bit again. From the Adhyatma Ramayana and the Valmiki Ramayana, there's many similarities, or it's identical, and then there's some differences, significant differences. One of those significant differences has to do with Sita's kidnapping. In the Adhyatma Ramayana, one day when they're in the forest and Lakshmana has gone off to gather some roots and fruits and edibles for Sita to prepare, Ram speaks to her. Ram speaks, Sita, O best of the upholders of vows of chastity and faithfulness to your husband, I have something very confidential to tell you. I'm going to perform some human-like activities, and details what his plan is of killing various demons for which he, the Supreme Lord, has appeared in this world. So he's leaving aside their human-like and speaking from the voice of the Supreme Lord. So he requests her to enter into fire, and that he'll retrieve her out of fire when the demon-killing business is over. Adhyatma Purana. Sita, immediately taking the instructions of her husband in the core of her heart, the lotus feet in the core of her heart, builds a fire, enters into the fire, and disappears, leaving behind a Maya Sita. This is Adhyatma Ramayana. And of course, later on, the Maya Sita enters into the fire. This is in Ravana's abode, where the real Sita comes out and the Maya Sita disappears. Now, in Valmiki Ramayana, that episode, and then Lakshmana comes back, and he doesn't even recognize, because this looks just like Sita, sounds just like Sita. It's Sita. Even Lakshmana doesn't know. Sita and Ram are the only ones that know. And Agni, of course. So that's Adhyatma, but Valmiki, there's no such episode before Marich comes as the golden deer. And the tribulation of testing Sita by fire is a real tribulation in Valmiki Ramayana. But at Adhyatma Ramayana it's not. Very significant difference. Here's a few others. In the Adhyatma Ramayana, which is Tulsidas takes from Adhyatma Purana this particular event, where when Ahalya is cursed by Gautama, she becomes a stone. And then when Ram comes into the ashram of Gautama, he steps on the stone and Ahalya comes out. In Valmiki Ramayana, she doesn't become a stone, she becomes invisible. And she's told to hide herself, although she's invisible, within brushes and leaves, and no one will see her, undergoing austerities, living on air. Until Ram comes, and when he enters into the ashram, then this curse will be gone. That's a significant difference. Another one is Lakshman Rekha. I didn't know this wasn't in Valmiki Ramayana, but it's not in Valmiki Ramayana. When Lakshman goes to get Ram, because Marich, in the shape of a golden deer, has disappeared, Sita says heavy things to Ram, so Lakshman has to go. He takes his bow and makes a circle and says, don't cross outside the circle, Lakshman Rekha. That's not in Valmiki Ramayana. But it's something that we all hear about. It's in Adhyatma Ramayana. And then Tulsi Ramayana, or Tulsi, his writing on the glorification of Lord Ramachandra. The squirrel who's kicking pebbles and dust to help build the bridge, that's not in Valmiki Ramayana. It's in Adhyatma Ramayana, and it comes in Ramacharita, Tulsi's writing. There's more, but time is finished. So we'll as we go along, we'll make some other mentions, and in the end I want to repeat it again. It's okay, because there's different yugas, cycles of the 4 yugas, and the Supreme Lord appears and does things a little differently in those cycle of 4 yugas. It's quite okay. Prabhupada explained it, I remember hearing it this way. Krishna's pastimes are like a spool. Now, my sense when he used that term was like a thread is placed on a wooden, or now it's plastic or whatever it is, little cylinder, and you pull the thread from the spool. Or using the way that motion pictures, little frames and frames and frames put on a spool, and you run it through the light and it shows the motion picture. Moving pictures. Motion pictures. Film. So Prabhupada said Krishna's pastimes are like that. It's on a spool. And he just plays his pastimes again and again. But each time there's a little variation, because variety is the mother of enjoyment. That was Prabhupada's explanation. That was all we needed. Variety is the mother of enjoyment. So it's not stereotyped, hackneyed, and stale and dry. It's variegated. Basic themes, but variety also. And it's perfectly okay. So there are some, if you are accustomed, if you're from North India, if you're from South India, or this part of India, if you've heard Ram's pastimes this way and not that way, don't be disturbed if you hear it that way instead of this way. Because they're variations, and it's okay. And Prabhupada comments in that verse from the Bhagavatam that Sukadeva Goswami says, there are many versions of Ram's pastimes. I'm only going to make reference to the authorized ones. So we've been very careful to only make statements that are authorized ones from authorized sources that our acharyas accept. And even the renderings of those can be very colorful. Tad idam kalpa bedaiva sambhavyam. You hear this again as we go along. So now the last is, I think what I'd like to do is, we'll take these, some of you are interested, I'm sure. So, those that helped prepare this wonderful text that took hours and hours to prepare and as many hours to edit to make it a little more concise. We'll send you these, how the two different Adhyatma Ramayana and Valmiki Ramayana are different. And then there's others, by the way. Kamba wrote a Ramayana, and very humbly it's now called Kamba Ramayana instead of Valmiki Ramayana. He was a 17th century poet, not part of any known sampradaya at least, and those that are his followers or like to hear from him say that one time there's a local lore, who knows, in front of the Nrsimha deity in Sri Rangam, and the Lord told him, He placed his writing before the Lord and he approved it. Anyway, so it's a very popular source that is also variant in certain ways. Now, a few other things I'm going to end. The followers, because we're in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we understand things through that lens or that mood of devotion. The devotion of the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take one to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. And here we are, hearing about the pastimes of Ram. So I want to make that connection clear, why we're doing this while we're followers of Mahaprabhu, who takes us to Braja Prem. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 5, Adi Lila, there's a series of verses that help one to understand this topic. One translation reads, text 132, in whatever form one knows the Lord, one speaks of Him in that way. In this there is no falsity, since everything is possible in Krishna. Now it's an interesting, profound verse. It's basically saying Krishna reciprocates with your love for Him. As you love Him, He reciprocates. And He'll show you that form, and He'll be for you because He's unlimited. Because He's unlimited, He can display Himself however He likes, and He likes to display Himself according to the love of His devotees. This is wonderfully described in Brihat Bhagavatamrita in length, but there isn't time to go into it in length. But even in Vaikuntha, where we hear the form of Narayana looks like this, for the various personalities who see and have feelings for the Lord in a certain way, they see that form according to their love. He shows them that form, not just forearms with symbols of Vishnu and decorated in a certain way. He shows that form according to their love for Him, because that's Him. He reciprocates with one's love for Him. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, some of my disciples were arguing, and they brought their argument to me and asked for, the referee to settle the argument. Some people say when you chant Hari Rama, it's Lord Ramachandra, and others were saying, no, it's Lord Balaram. Prabhupada, can you referee this one? And he said, you're both right. Because the Lord appears according to how you have affection for Him. It's because Krishna is not limited. When you're calling Rama, there's other options too. Ask Sanatana Goswami and he'll tell you it's a feature of Krishna, not Balaram. So, amongst Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, there were some who had particular love for Lord Ramachandra. And they saw Lord Ramachandra in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's going to be 3 references, and we'll end this evening. Purandara Pandita is a devotee who lived in a village where Lord Nityananda and his associates came, having ecstatic kirtan, prema kirtan. And Purandara Pandit was a pandit, he's a brahmana. For some reason he was up in a tree. We'll find out why in a moment. He was up in a tree and Lord Nityananda and his associates were having this ecstatic kirtan, dancing and going mad in love of Krishna. And he jumped down from the tree and called out loudly, "I am Angada!" Angada is one of the associates of the Vanaras in Lord Ramachandra's pastimes. So by associating with Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, one's love for the personality of Godhead, even in the form of Lord Ramachandra, may be revealed or reposed or brought out. There was another reference, again Chaitanya Charitamrita, is Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and their third brother was Anupam. And Anupam was a devotee of Ram. And he was steadfast in his devotion to Ram. And Lord Chaitanya and the associates of Lord Chaitanya, and even in particular his two brothers, Rupa and Sanatan, were deep and going deeper and deeper into the love of Radha and Krishna. And their third brother, Anupam, was a devotee of Lord Ram. So here's what Prabhupada writes in a purport. Vallabha, Anupam, Lord Chaitanya gave him the name Vallabha. Vallabha was a great devotee of Sri Ramachandra. Therefore, he could not seriously consider the worship of Radha Govinda according to the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yet, he directly accepted Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ramachandra. Or Ramachandra is within Mahaprabhu because within Mahaprabhu is everything. And then the third is Murari Gupta. In the beginning there was Ramastakam sung, the songs composed by Murari Gupta, an intimate associate of Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, because he was a great devotee of Ram. He worshipped deities of Sitaram. And he was a great devotee of Ramachandra. Great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. Both. They were of comparable age. Murari was a little older. But Lord Chaitanya, as Nimai Pandit, was always arguing and defeating, and Murari didn't like to get into arguments with Nimai. And one time they got in such a heated argument, they followed each other back and forth and jumped together into the Ganges and made it impossible for the ladies to get water for their cooking and brahmanas to bathe. Yet he was, in principle, very submissive. Although he was elder, he was very submissive to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So one time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed him in the superiority of Radha Krishna worship and why, and instructed him, accept the worship of Radha and Krishna. And Murari Gupta went home. And he was attracted to Radha and Krishna, but he couldn't give up the worship of Lord Ramachandra. And he couldn't give up or neglect the instruction of Mahaprabhu, Nimai Pandit, because of his love for him. So he couldn't sleep all night long. He was simply crying and crying, praying to Lord Ramachandra to take his life. That was how serious he was in devotion to Lord Ramachandra and his devotion to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The next morning, because he couldn't sleep all night, he went to see Lord Chaitanya and said, "What should I do? I've sold my head to the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra, but if I break your order to worship Lord Sri Krishna, then what can I do?" Lord Chaitanya was very pleased. He said, I just was testing you. I know that you're a dear devotee of Lord Ramachandra. You have such devotion, even I've given you the instruction to give up, you couldn't give it up. I repeatedly asked you to change your worship from Lord Ram to Lord Krishna. And then, according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says to Murari Gupta, you're an incarnation of Hanuman. Therefore, why should you give up your service to Lord Ram? Later, some other time, Lord Chaitanya showed his form of Ramachandra and Sita and Lakshman. And of course, Murari Gupta's Hanuman. And all the Vanaras, and there was Murari Gupta like a Vanara playing with all the other Vanaras and enjoying the association of Lord Ramachandra, Sita and Lakshman. This is an expansion of that verse from earlier in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the Lord shows that form as you have devotion for Him. Among the verses that Murari Gupta composed in glorification of Lord Ramachandra were sung earlier this evening, Ramastakam, glorifying the beauty of Ram, the marriage with Sita, his powerful protection of others by killing of the demons, and his wonderful qualities and pastimes. And the best of all the Ikshvaku dynasty, the rulers in that line, he had such love for Lord Ramachandra. The explanation that's given is, when Lord Chaitanya heard this description, this Ramastakam, he took tilak and wrote on the forehead of Murari Gupta, Ramdas, and said, "You are Ramdas." Without Lord Ram, you cannot live for even a single sesame seed's worth of time. I am your Lord Rama. Please know that for certain. Saying this, Lord Ramachandra manifested his form as Lord Ramachandra with Sita and all his companions. Spontaneously, more prayers were recited by Murari. Glory, glory to Lord Ramachandra, who has now become Sachi's son. More prayers and more prayers and more prayers rolling on the ground. Lord Chaitanya picked him up and said to him very gravely, very lovingly, "Please do not know anything but devotion to me. If that is your desire, I will be Lord Ramachandra to you. I will be Lord Ramachandra. And you will taste the nectar of service to me." Listen. Still, in this Sankirtan movement, you must chant the glories of Sri Radha Krishna. In this way, please render devotional service to me. Please hear these words with all your heart. Now, that's very profound. Especially considering what the earlier verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita says is, the Lord appears as you have love for Him. You're Ramdas. You're Hanuman. You're His worshipper. I will be that Lord Ramachandra for you. And worship Radha Krishna. In the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are very deep, but he's the shelter of everyone. And those that understood him properly saw that he is their worshipable Lord. Because he's the source of everything. He's the source of Ramachandra. So tomorrow we'll hear some more on this topic. And the beginning parts of the narration of Ramayana by Love and Kush. So now we'll have Damodarastaka prayers. You have some announcements? Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Ramachandra ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. There are a few announcements for this evening. Today's dinner